Record. Welcome to episode 5 of the Film for Fans podcast, your home for movie news, reviews, and movie fan views. Your podcast from movie fans for movie fans. I am your host, Ryan Dunleavy, and joined is my soccer-clad friend, Rob Dunham.
As always.
As always.
Pretty shirts.
Yes. Yeah, you're really missing out if you're not watching on YouTube. You get to see the different jerseys every week. But we're thankful for our podcast audience as well. All right, we got a great show for you. We're going to talk the return of new movies to theaters, when fans might actually show back up, movies that we watch regularly, and, of course, our watch list. So, Rob, you got any thoughts off the top?
It's exciting that movies are coming back. The question is, when will they be back where we are, and will we feel comfortable when they are back?
Yes.
Lots to talk about.
All right, so let's begin right there with the return of movies. So after what seems like forever, a slate of new movies is scheduled to be released this weekend. All of them are slightly more of the indie variety, but they're still relatively big releases. So we have Unhinged, starring Russell Crowe, Words on Bathroom Walls, kind of a teen romantic drama, Tulsa, Cutthroat City. All right, Rob, did you check out any of the trailers or any of the information on any of these? Do any of them seem interesting to you?
I did look up all of these movies. The one I actually saw a commercial for this weekend on regular TV was Unhinged. And I have to be honest, like, none of them are super, like, I need to go see them kind of feeling. When I saw the Unhinged commercial, one of the taglines was a movie that will make people come back to theaters. And I kind of reacted like, will it? Like you said, they're kind of, even though it's a Russell Crowe movie, it's more of that indie kind of dark, gritty feeling movie. Russell Crowe kind of plays a psychopath and looks terrifying and looks like he ate a lot of McDonald's. But I wouldn't say any of them are like super necessarily exciting to me. I think Tulsa looks interesting, story about a Marine and his daughter that he didn't know existed. That looks fairly intriguing to me, and seeing what they might do with that story. How about yourself?
Yeah, I would say they're all intriguing in the fact that they are new movies that I have not seen in theaters. That's their primary appeal to me at this moment. I am slightly interested in Unhinged. The initial description of it reminds me of like the 1990s Michael Douglas movie Falling Down. I don't know if you ever saw this one, but basically he's just a normal dude who just goes absolutely nuts on people. And so for whatever reason, this movie kind of brought back some memories of that one. So if I check one out this weekend, it might be that one. Also because it's the only one playing in a theater remotely close to where I'm at.
Yeah.
So
yeah, one of the questions is when the theaters closest to us will open up. And
yes.
We'll have to see about that.
Yeah, I've been disappointed with the theaters in our local area giving us some sort of indication as to if they're going to open, when they're open. The only thing I'm getting is like from the corporate Regal saying they're opening this weekend, or corporate AMC says they're opening. Not getting much of anything about some of the local theaters in our area. So that's really messing with whether you can see movies or not.
I did see that Regal, for those of us, I know Ryan and I, and probably maybe some others who listen, who are unlimited pass members to Regal, they announced that they're going to do a month for free when the theaters start back up. So from when your local theater opens back up, you won't have to pay for the first month of your subscription back, which I think is a good, solid move. I mean, the theaters didn't do anything wrong to make this happen, but I think that will definitely encourage people to continue wanting to show up and encourage them to stick with the service.
Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, it's a positive development that movies are being released, and so far we haven't seen any more delays of some of the bigger releases coming up in the next couple of days. I think New Mutants tickets go on sale this weekend, and next tomorrow, actually, I think Tenet tickets go on sale in some places.
I think we are reaching the actual end of the world because New Mutants is actually going to be released. It's been in production for about 4 years. If you haven't been following that movie, it's been an insane story.
Yeah. So it will be interesting to see what the first slate of new movies does. But we'll get to some of that in a bit when we talk when we get to our discussion items about theaters. So just happy to have them back at this point. So speaking of releases that are coming out soon, there's some interesting articles, one particularly on IndieWire, about exactly what theaters are going to have to go through to get Tenet. So this is pretty interesting. This, I think, is fascinating from a fan's perspective because this is the backside, inside business part of theaters that most fans have no clue and we never get to hear about. So this article from IndieWire, which we'll link to in the comments, just details all of the procedures for a specific theater getting to release Tenet. And some of them are pretty crazy. For one, they are having to shell out 63% of the gross to Warner Brothers. So 63% of the gross for the movie goes to Warner Brothers, which is an unprecedented amount. Rob, what did you think of this article?
I thought it was pretty wild. There's a lot of other restrictions or guidelines in there in regards to people having to go almost above and beyond local ordinances when it comes to mask wearing. I'm sure that Warner Brothers does not want to be associated with an outbreak happening because of their big movie. So I understand why they're asking for these things. I do wonder how strictly or if they will even be able to be policed at all, because you're not going to have a theater employee in the theater with night vision goggles on, making sure everyone is wearing their mask unless they're putting something in their mouth food-wise, which is the restriction that they suggested. Everyone has to wear a mask unless they're eating or drinking something from the concessions. I think ideally the safest thing would be to not have concessions, but no theater is going to operate that way because they make the lion's share of their money through the concessions. So they wouldn't even reopen if that was required of them, I don't think. Also, extended commitments to how long they're going to show the movie on their screens, depending on how many screens they have. I'm not sure what a typical commitment is to that, but it does seem like a pretty decent sized one, because I saw that I believe it was the big theaters with like 15 screens have to commit to basically showing it for 3 months.
Yeah.
Straight.
Screen for
so it seems like a pretty big commitment.
I think so. I also think in part there's not going to be as many movies out, so I don't think it's going to be quite as cumbersome for that, because I think there's just fewer releases. Now, where it really gets interesting is when on your very small screens, like if you have just 2 screens, for instance, you have to do it for at least 5 weeks, which will run you into the other Warner Brothers release, Wonder Woman 1984, which is coming out October 2nd. So you might be in a situation where your small theater has just 2 Warner Brothers movies in it, Tenet and 1984. Tenet must have the largest non-IMAX screen each week. So your biggest theater has to be dedicated to Tenet every week of that contract, unless you were able to stipulate otherwise. And another interesting feature is that that you're publicizing it, that any of the publicizing has to be done at your cost and not at the studio's extra cost. So that's another thing. So this is really interesting from a business standpoint of Warner Brothers putting all these thoughts and restrictions on their new movies. So do you think, who's getting the better end of this? Is this good for both sides? Is it good for Warner Brothers? Is it good for the theaters? What do you think?
I think theoretically it's good for Warner Brothers if a lot of people show up, but I don't know if that's going to happen or not. And so it might not be good for anyone. It really depends on what happens with people's comfort level with coming out to see the movie in the theater. I think the guidelines that they've released kind of make it pretty clear that they're trying to recoup every penny they can back from not being able to have stuff in the theater for so long. And the question is, will it succeed? And then will it impact and alter how studios negotiate with theaters moving forward?
Yeah, I think my initial thought is that overall it benefits both sides, because for individual theaters, you need a big release. You need a movie people are going to want to come to see, to be willing to come back to the theater. And so they really need a big release. And for studios, their incentive is to wait until you can possibly have the biggest margin. So the studio is conceding a bit by putting it out there pretty early on in theater reopenings and taking the risk that not a lot of people are going to come out, and that they're not going to make as much money if they pushed it off, say, another 6-8 months. So they're taking a risk from that end, and the theaters on the other side are taking a risk in having to commit for such a long time for the movie. So ultimately, I think it kind of benefits both. But I guess we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
All right. So another franchise movie, that news story that made its way to the internet this past week, is our good old friend Lawrence Fishburne was back in the movie news. And he was asked about the upcoming Matrix 4 movie, and he confirmed he would not be in Matrix 4. In fact, he confirmed he was not even asked to be in Matrix 4. What are your thoughts about a Matrix movie without Morpheus?
It'll definitely be interesting and different, that's for sure. I don't know if it'll be better. I think you and I might both agree that as they went on, not that any of them were poor movies in my opinion by any stretch, but I think that the best one was the first one, and they kind of slid down a little bit from there. So there are some things to take into account. In reading the article, it said that one of the reasons may be that they killed the Morpheus character off in The Matrix Online, which was the video game, which to me is not a good reason to not have him in the movie, if that's the case, because I would wager that a large majority of the people, myself included, who enjoyed the Matrix movies had no idea that Morpheus was killed in The Matrix Online.
Correct.
So it's not like you're holding to something that everyone knows already and they're going to get mad about if you include him. Another thing I saw was that even very recently they were in talks with some people to play young Morpheus and a young Neo. And so you wonder if they are moving in that direction, maybe, and almost looking to do a reboot or a shift. And we'll talk about that concept when we talk about one of the movies we watched this week coming up. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it was interesting. Like, if Lawrence Fishburne weren't going to be in it, none of the original cast would be in it, then it'd be more understandable. But we know that several of the other characters are definitely coming back. So the idea of leaving Morpheus out, I guess it's kind of a wait and see. But Morpheus was one of the strongest characters in the original Matrix, and I just think that the loss of that character, I don't know that there's going to be enough people. I I don't know if there's going to be enough people available who can carry the load character-wise. And it's going to be interesting to see if an entirely new generation of people is even going to care about The Matrix, because the movies are 20 years old now.
Yeah, you wonder if they're going to try and do a complete reboot with new characters. So that will be interesting to see what they have planned.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll see. It will be a shame to not see Morpheus, but it is what it is. So let's move on to our discussion items. So one of the things that movies coming back has triggered is this question. Now that theaters are starting to open and movies are starting to come back, how soon are you expecting fans to be back in theaters?
Yeah, I really don't know the answer to that question, because I know that even for me personally, it's a bit of a struggle to figure out if I feel comfortable going back to theaters or not. And I'm obviously a big enough movie fan that I have a podcast about it. So yeah, I think that the numbers won't be super high. I think it'll be trickle, and I think that a lot of people will be holding out, waiting to see if it can be done safely. I mean, you've kind of seen this. We are both big sports fans, and some of the leagues that have succeeded have been really strict and cautious about things, and they're pulling things off, but they're sticking to guidelines, and that's why it's working. So the question is, will people stick to the guidelines, and will it work? Another thing that's difficult when it comes to movie theaters is, if someone spreads it there, it might not be the easiest to trace back to the movie theater. So I don't even know if we're going to have a fully rounded picture of if it's succeeding or not. So I think for some people, it won't matter what you say, they won't be coming back for a while. So we'll have to wait and see. I really wish I had a better answer, more definitive answer than that, but I think a lot of it is going to be based on what happens when they open back up.
Yeah, I think there you will have some people who will not come back at all. You will have some people who, it doesn't matter, they'll come back. And then you'll have the people in the middle, I think, will come back for a specific movie. I think you're going to see that. I think they will come back for a specific movie. And especially if you're a little bit cautious, you'll wait for maybe week 2. Just to get a feel of, hey, how did theaters go? And when talk to other people, hey, did it feel like a safe environment? Did it feel like a good environment? Was it, were you uncomfortable in there? If the reports come back positive, hey, this seemed like a good experience, I think fans will come back for specific movies. So that's why I think Tenet is so important. I think people will come back for Tenet. They will come back for Wonder Woman 1984. Some of the smaller movies, I think they're going to struggle more.
Yeah, there's so much information out there from all different perspectives about whether it's even safe to be in a movie theater. So it's just kind of we have to wait and see approach for a lot of people, because they're going to want to know that they can be safe. And I think we've seen with this whole situation in every area of life, there's no for sure knowing.
Yeah.
It's something that we have to figure out as we go.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll have some exciting movies to encourage people to come out, and hopefully everyone will be safe, and it'll be something that we can think about instead of what's going on. And, we watched Inferno this week for our watch list, which is the opposite. I think we decided we wanted to think more about it. But that movie completely, the context completely changes looking at it now from when it came out a few years ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see. I'm looking forward to being able to see movies again. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so let's go to the next one, and this is something that I was thinking about this week. There are just some times where there are movies either on television or in your playlist in one of the streaming services, movies that you just go back to on a regular basis. and they may not even be your favorite movies. Maybe it's just something that's on a lot. But there are movies that all of us just kind of watch on a regular basis that perhaps we have watched more times than we probably should have, or how much we care about them indicates. So what are some of them for you? I'll go first on this one. So this was the movie that triggered this thought process for me. Is I have seen the movie Zodiac like 9 times. 9 times. I mean, I wouldn't consider it my top 10, my top 20, but for whatever reason, I've watched this movie a bunch. I get in the mood for it. I see it on TV. I stop and I watch it. I think it's on Netflix at the moment. I'll go watch it. It's a movie about a guy, a journalist, trying to track down a serial killer and doing investigations. And I love investigation movies, and this seems to be like almost like an archetype of that type of movie that I like. So I just watch it a lot. So what's something like that on your list?
I would say that probably up near the top of the list, going in a completely different direction, is the movie Idiocracy.
Ah, yes.
Every once in a while, I just get in the mood to watch something dumb, something funny and dumb. Sometimes you just want to turn your brain off and not have to think, just to enjoy something, not have to be super focused on the visuals, even just be able to relax and laugh. And, that movie's becoming kind of a documentary now, so it's not maybe as funny as it used to be to me, but there are so many aspects of that movie I just find hilarious, and I laugh every time I watch the movie. So that's one for me.
Fantastic concept. Not necessarily well executed, but fantastic concept.
It was funny. I was in Sam's Club yesterday getting some groceries, and as I was walking around, all I could hear in my head over and over again was, "Welcome to Costco. I love you."
Yeah, if you're not familiar, it's a movie from, I think it was Mike Judge. It was a Mike Judge movie.
Yep.
And basically, human race just keeps getting stupider and stupider and stupider. And a guy wakes up after being in cryo sleep for a number of years and finds he's like the most intelligent man on the face of the planet. He's encountering them like watering their crops with Gatorade and whatnot.
If you haven't seen this movie and you want to laugh, watch this movie. You will laugh.
So a couple more for me. The Hunger Games, usually because they're on like every weekend. They're on TV every weekend. So if I'm cleaning the house or if I'm doing something random and I scroll through the channels, like I'm just going to put something on, the Hunger Games always seems to be on. And so I'll turn it on because it's usually better than all the other stuff that's on. It's compelling enough, and I've seen them, so I don't have to pay super close attention to them. So it's one of those, it's more of, I've watched these movies a lot out of convenience more so than the fact that I care about them. And I would say the last one for me is probably Interstellar. And this comes from the fact that I have it downloaded onto my phone. It's downloaded onto my phone. Whenever I like go away and I share a hotel room with my wife, we normally go to bed at very different times. So she'll go to bed and I'll be in the hotel room watching Interstellar on my phone. I love it. It's one of my favorite movies, but I watch it because it's downloaded onto my phone.
That's the sacred reserved space on the phone.
Yeah.
So for me, a couple of additional things. Obviously, I've watched a lot of Disney movies and other animated movies over and over and over
yes.
over again because I have 2 kids. What I found interesting about that is that I've noticed this recently. When I actually pay attention and watch the movie, I realized that I've seen movies like 20 times that I didn't catch like 80% of the visual stuff going on in the movie because I was so not tuned into it that I could probably recite the script from memory, but I don't remember all the visuals that I'm seeing. Like it feels like the first time I'm seeing them. And then one kind of more along the lines of your Interstellar pick for me is The Prestige, which I feel like I could watch every day of the week. And that movie, every single time I've watched it, and I've probably seen it it's got to be like 20 or 30 times at this point. I get chills at the end every single time.
Yeah.
Which doesn't make sense because like once you have a movie figured out, you like it shouldn't impact you that way. But to me, it's not a perfect movie by any stretch, but I think the way it's written is about as close to perfect writing as you can have in a movie. Yeah. And hits every single note perfectly. And by the time you get to the end, that's my favorite movie to watch with people who haven't seen it yet.
Yes.
Because every single person I've watched it with who hasn't seen it yet, at the end they go, whoa.
You get hit by a weight at the end of it. You do. You absolutely get hit by a weight. It's
like just the enormity of the whole situation hits you all at the end of the movie, all at once. It's like a tidal wave.
Yeah.
And it's incredible.
Maybe in one of the upcoming weeks we'll have to rank Christopher Nolan movies because that.
Oh boy, I don't know if I can do that. That's difficult.
Yeah, it's gonna be a tough one. All right, so let's talk about our watch list here. So we selected 2 movies last week that we were going to watch, and the 2 movies were Inferno and X-Men: Days of Future Past. So let's start with Inferno. So the Inferno is the 3rd movie from the Dan Brown books, starring the character Robert Langdon, in this case played by Tom Hanks. It's a movie about a potential viral outbreak caused by a terrorist. And Rob, what did you think of the movie? It starts off in a rather interesting manner.
Yeah, the first 5-6 minutes of the movie, you kind of feel like you're in a fever dream and going insane. Yeah. And what's interesting about it is that it all ties back into reality as the movie goes along. But when you're watching it, they kind of put you in the mind of Robert Langdon, the character played by Tom Hanks. Just these visions he's seeing and the craziness he's feeling about everything that's happening around him. It's a very interesting way to start a movie out, to kind of disorient the audience. And I think for some people that might cause them to stop watching. But they do that because they're banking on more people than not being intrigued by it instead of being frustrated or confused by it. I mean, for me, it definitely made me alert and really wanting to see what would happen next. What do you think of how they use that as a device?
Yeah, it's fascinating because a lot of times you'll start out with the attention getter that really doesn't play much into the role of the movie. Like you'll start out with an action scene that ends up not being super important. But this was interesting because basically their whole goal is to immediately confuse you and put you in a state of disarray. And like you were saying, it basically gets you into the mind of the character, Robert Langdon's character, from the moment one. And so it really sets you on edge as a viewer, and you consequently immediately identify with Robert Langdon because you are as confused as he is confused, and you are as uncertain as he's uncertain as to what's going on. So you immediately get locked into his character and what he wants. So I think that's a fascinating way to get you to immediately care about the character. Usually the character does something that's called like the save the cat principle, where the character does something heroic to get you to care about them. In this case, they did that by giving you the same mental frame of mind as they're giving the main character. And it really sets up the movie. Everything that happens from that point in the movie is set right away with that initial feel and premise.
Yeah, it's kind of unsurprising with Ron Howard and Brian Grazer and the other people who are involved that the movie is very well executed, and it just feels big. All the way through the movie, it feels like things are important, things matter. It's well acted, it's well done. I don't think it's the best movie in the world by any stretch, but it's definitely very solid. And I enjoyed. I'd not seen it before we watched it this week, so I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I think the Robert Langdon movies, I rank them in specific order, in that 1 through 3. The third one is better than the second one. The second one is better than the first one. So I think they've been getting better as a series. I also read the book for this one before watching the movie, and this is one of those ones where I actually like the movie better than the book. I think the book was more convoluted. I think the moral arc in the story is clearer in the movie than it was in the book. So I thought the movie actually improved on the story a little bit, which was not always the case. So yeah, so go see Inferno. It's a pretty good movie. Next up, X-Men: Days of Future Past, a superhero classic. So this one features both some of the members of the original cast of X-Men, as well as their updated younger versions that they debuted in X-Men First Class. So it has both sets of characters in it at the same time. And the idea, the older characters are facing annihilation and have to travel back to the past, in which case they link up with their younger selves. So Rob, what did you think of this movie as a concept and as a premise, given that it was basically to try and bridge the gap between those characters?
Yeah, time travel can be a tough concept to pull off well. And the question of, does something that you go back and do impact something in the future? And this movie is very clearly on that wavelength, that they are intentionally trying to change things so that bad things don't happen in the future. It's very cool to see James McAvoy and Patrick Stewart both playing Charles Xavier, seeing mannerisms that are the same, but also seeing personalities that are completely different, and working through some of the reasons that change and shift happened in the character. It's a view back at Professor X that you don't necessarily see in the other X-Men movies. And from the very first moment you see him and he's walking, it's kind of confusing and disorienting. And then you realize they explain it as you go through why he's able to do that and what's happening in his time, and all the things that need to change for things to get better in the future. And I think they did a good job of bridging the gap between the old and new characters. And it's not an easy thing to have both on the screen sharing the stage at the same time, because that just doesn't happen very often in movie franchises. So I thought it was a fairly unique take on things, and I appreciated what they pulled off. I think it was a difficult feat, and I think they accomplished it. So
yeah, you look at things like for instance, the latest Star Wars trilogy, where they mix some old characters and some new characters. Now, they aren't necessarily younger versions of themselves, but the interplay between the new and the old characters didn't always go super cleanly or super smoothly. But this one I actually thought went really, really well. And I think it boils down to the four characters and how they're able to convey the same emotion. That is the Charles Xavier and Magneto characters, both in the present and in the past, the younger versions of them. The dynamic and the relationship between those two is the same in the present and in the past. That kind of love-hate relationship, mutual respect, different philosophies. I think that relationship, if you can get that right in both time periods and you can equal that up the same, I think that's what makes the movie work. That's what makes it work. And that's the dynamic that creates that realism that makes it work back and forth. And I think the X-Men is fantastic, primarily almost because it has basically those two characters and their very different visions of the world and their very different viewpoints of the world. And so the fact that McAvoy and Fassbender and Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen were all able to carry that same dynamic, I think is really, really what makes it work.
Yeah, they definitely, it helps when everybody is good actors.
Yeah.
Which is definitely the case in this.
Yeah. My only minor complaint about it is the kind of extinction level event that they're facing at the beginning of the movie just comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like you show up and it's like, oh, it's here. We're about to be destroyed. Now let's go to the movie. And they kind of fill in the backstory a little bit, but that felt a little rushed.
Yeah, it's the record scratch. I bet you're wondering how I got here moment of the X-Men franchise.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay, so that's our 2 movies from last week. Rob, what are you watching this coming week?
One thing that I'm gonna watch that my brother just watched the other night and recommended to me is Project Power, which is a new Netflix movie with Jamie Foxx and Joseph Gordon-Levitt that looks like it has some real potential. And from what he told me about it, I'm very interested in checking it out.
Okay. I am going to attempt to see Unhinged somewhere, some way. And I might get around to watching Inception too. I want to watch it again before Tenet comes out. I would love ideally to see it in a theater, but I'm not sure where it's playing anywhere close to me. So I might watch Inception again this week.
I think we've also got a couple movies from previous weeks that both of us have watched that we're interested in talking about. So we might have something from some of those movies coming up next week for you guys.
Yeah. Yeah. So anything else, Rob? Anything else you want to get into?
I'm ready for a nap, so you know.
Well, on that note, thank you for tuning in to the Film for Fans podcast. Make sure you rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. We're available on Stitcher, Spotify, and check out our YouTube channel if you'd rather watch us in person. And check out filmforfans.com. Thank you and have a great time watching movies.
See you later.